Good day, Space Cadets, and welcome back to Moon Farm. My name's Alex, and I am the captain of this expedition, and you're listening to the Farm Chores podcast. As always, you get to hear all of my farm chores while I get those done, and I spend this time talking to you, sharing a little bit of updates about the farm, and talking about our show's topic. Something I haven't mentioned in previous episodes, if you want to send me an email, and I very well might read it on the podcast, you can do that, alex@akronmicrogreens.com. That's AKRON, microgreens, plural.com. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of those podcasting platforms that allow you to leave a rating, make sure you leave a 5-star rating so that they know to send this podcast out to more of our friends. Weather today is pretty warm, surprisingly warm actually. We're in the 40s today, which is not normal for Ohio January. The greenhouse, last I checked, it was 63 degrees. 63 degrees in the greenhouse is phenomenal for January. Now I know I mentioned, at least in my YouTube videos, that I shut down a lot of the aquaponics system, but if we keep staying warm like this, it won't be an issue. It'll keep growing. It'll be wonderful. Other farm updates, we're getting ready to launch our CSA, or as I like to call it, our produce box subscription. It's easier to call it that because a lot of people don't intrinsically know what a CSA is. And so every time I say, oh, I'm starting a CSA, they go, oh, what's that? So it's just easier to call it the produce subscription box. And we have set a date. February 7th is going to be the first delivery in the Ravenna, Ohio delivery route. Assuming that all goes well, hopefully we will expand it to other areas very quickly. The other thing that I'm working on a lot right now is getting partnered with other local businesses. So my dream really for the CSA program is that my market will become kind of an online farmer's market. So it'll have all of the things that you expect to find when you go to the farmer's market. It'll have your produce, obviously, that's what I do. But we'll also have vendors that sell things that I don't produce. So maple syrup, honey, jellies and jams, spices, things like that. Coffee, that's a big one. Whenever I partner with one of these new businesses, I'm going to try to give you a little profile right here on the podcast. And if you are local, it'd be great for you to support them and let them know that I sent you over. If you're not local, some of them do have online ordering and shipping, so you can certainly go check them out. And if you like them, place an order. And I'm sure they would really appreciate that. Another farm news, let me give you an update on Lexi and Lemmy, the barn cats. They're doing good. They're not super friendly cats to begin with. They, by design, I'll admit I'm not a huge cat person. So they are here to serve a purpose, and I can appreciate that role that they play, very important, keeping the rodent population down, which really keeps disease down, actually helps keep the tick population and the presence of Lyme disease down. So super beneficial things. But at the same time, I'm not really interested in cuddling with a cat. So Lexi and Lemmy are semi-feral, which just means that they don't spend a lot of time on the cuddly end of the spectrum. They would rather be left alone, which is great. I love that. When I was looking for cats, I told the rescue, hey, I want a cat that I'm going to see, that I will be able to look at every once in a while, make sure that they're not injured or they don't need help or anything. But after that, they should be independent. It would be great for them to really be able to manage themselves and take care of themselves. Obviously, I'm going to keep feeding them. I'm still going to take care of my cats. But, here we are in the feed shed, getting ready to dish out feed, and I can see fresh mouse droppings. I hate that. I really hate that. I cannot wait for these cats to be ready to get out. Ooh, I hate that. If you can't tell, I really don't like it. But they are doing better. The first couple days, they really didn't eat much. And then this last night, they ate all of the food I left, basically. So that's a big plus. I actually have to feed them, so I'll probably talk to them a little bit later in the podcast. Other farm news, my goal is to try and make this podcast longer. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to get more animals. Really, if my chores get longer, then the podcast gets longer, right? That makes sense because I have more time to spend talking to all of you. So I went this last week to look at some rabbits. When I was in high school, I did 4-H and I kept Dutch rabbits and bred them for show and showed them at the county fair. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot. But then once I got to college, I kind of let that go because obviously it's hard to run a rabbitry when you're in college. So now that I'm more established, and this gets kind of into the show topic a little bit. The show topic today is we're going to talk about finding your diversity and what kind of things you can do as a market producer or whatnot to be a little more successful. Anyway, I went to look at some rabbits. They were New Zealand Reds, which if you don't know what a New Zealand Red looks like, go look it up. They're adorable, but they're kind of a good, I guess a good meat breed because they grow quickly. You get a fryer-sized 3-pound rabbit in 8 weeks, which is as fast as my quail. Actually, it's faster because it produces more meat in the same amount of time. And interestingly enough, the gestation period for a rabbit is about the same as hatching quail eggs. So I'd like to see more homesteaders check out rabbit as a source of meat. I know for me, processing poultry is less emotionally draining than processing any kind of mammal. So I don't know, I hope I get more used to it, but I understand that it's not quite the same thing. However, they're a fantastic source of meat. They're super high in protein, one of the highest protein meat sources you can find, but also one of the leanest. They have little to no fat. Very lean meat, very delicious too. I mean, it's usable in just about any way you'd use any other red meat. You know, it's, oh goodness, spilled feed. Hi, chickens. You can use parts of it as burger. I know a lot of people make stew with kind of the legs. It's a good meat, it really is. So I'm excited to be adding that to the farm and getting that different source. In the state of Ohio, we have what's called amenable species and non-amenable species. There you go, chickens. Enjoy your corn. Oh, the ducks want to come on over here. Get some corn. Go give Murphy his food too. So amenable species are, it's complicated to describe, but to put it really simply, amenable species are species that are covered by the law. So, for example, beef and cows is an amenable species because the law specifically makes rules for processing and selling beef. Hi, Murphy. Hello. Are you hungry? Oh, you're all wet. Were you rolling around in the mud? Yeah, you were. We were actually just doing some training here a minute ago, some off-leash training. He was doing very good. He did so good today. Yes, a good boy. Just a good boy. Yeah, here. You want some food? There you go. Yeah. I'll give you a little extra today. Oh, hello. Do you want to say something? Yeah. Do you want to? No? Okay. He was doing so good. So beef is an amenable species. If you're raising beef, you have to follow the laws regarding beef because beef are included in the laws. That's kind of what amenable means. In, for example, the poultry laws, ducks, chickens, interestingly enough, emus and ostriches are all amenable to that law. There are also what they call non-amenable species. Some of these make sense. They're species that are not, for all intents and purposes, the same, right? So, for example, white-tailed deer. If I wanted to raise deer on my farm, the challenging part is finding the deer because you can't just take them from the wild, and I would also have to have a permit from the Department of Natural Resources. But if I wanted to raise deer, deer are a non-amenable species, which means I don't have to follow the regulations surrounding beef in order to raise deer. Other examples of non-amenable species in the state of Ohio include quail, bison or buffalo. Swan is considered non-amenable, though I don't know if I've ever met anyone who's had swan. Here's your food, chickens. I would like to make the argument that Muscovy duck is a non-amenable species. Yeah. I am getting your eggs. Excuse me. I would argue that Muscovy duck is a non-amenable species, but it is not specifically mentioned in any of the laws. And that's part of the reason why I think it's non-amenable. It's also a completely different species from your typical mallard duck, your pecans, your khakis, your Indian runner ducks. Completely different species. The meat is different. They're from a completely different part of the world. So I don't think they're amenable to the laws surrounding your standard duck production. Don't take that as legal advice, though, because I don't know for sure. I could be wrong. But that's kind of the argument I'd like to make. So anyway, to circle this whole discussion all the way back around, rabbits are, in the state of Ohio, considered non-amenable. So what does that mean? Well, for, let's say, chickens, there are laws regarding who can process chickens, where they have to be, chicken has to be inspected if it's going to be sold off premises. If you process it on farm to sell on farm, you can do that, but you're only allowed to do 1,000 a year. So there's a bunch of rules. A non-amenable species does not have those rules. So what that means is that if I was raising rabbits for meat, I could process and sell as many rabbits as I want from the farm. Now, I couldn't take them to the farmer's market. That's not allowed. But I could sell as many as I want from the farm right here. And that's one reason why I kind of want to get into rabbit, because it's hard to find meats like that around here. Same with quail. And it'd be nice to be kind of the source for some of these other meats: Muscovy, quail, and rabbit. And that gets us into our show topic. Our topic today, like I said, is finding your diversity. And it's something that I've had to work with really specifically over the last year as I try to build this new farm setup that I've got going. Hello, quail. I am here to feed you. I also need to water you, so actually, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to step out and be right back. When I started Moon Farm, I started it as just a microgreen farm, right? If you're listening to this podcast and you found it organically, you've probably heard of Curtis Stone, who basically inspired a lot of people to grow microgreens, to grow leafy greens, to turn urban settings into farms. And that's sort of what I did at first. I did that for a couple years before starting this major endeavor, taking out a loan from the bank, buying some land, starting a bigger farm that does more diverse things. And my main goal the whole time was to be able to provide a diverse selection to my customers. It wasn't enough anymore to just offer microgreens. At some point you get tapped out there. There's some water for you. Oh, you need more than that. Wow, you're really low. These quail are thirsty. At some point you got to offer other options. You don't have to. You could specialize and take that to the farmer's market, but I wanted to make this my business. And in order to continue to grow the business, I decided the direction I wanted to go was the CSA program, like I mentioned. And in order to attract people to this marketplace, I knew that I would have to provide them with something really special. It wasn't enough to just offer microgreens and lettuce here to your door. I wanted to offer them more of a grocery experience, if you will. It would be my dream that people would go to Moon Farm first to do their shopping. And then whatever they couldn't get from Moon Farm, that's when they're going to head out to the local Walmart and get their food. I obviously don't make soup, I don't make cereal and stuff like that, but in terms of produce and then other farmers market, kind of local cottage food stuff, popcorn, coffee, tea, spices, all of those things, I want to offer that. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to partner with a lot of businesses to try and bulk up those offerings. But I knew from a farm perspective that it wasn't enough to just offer lettuce and microgreens. Some of the really, really obvious things, staple crop wise, that get people into a CSA program or get people associated with the farm, well, the first one was eggs. Eggs were a huge part this year. In fact, right now, my main profit right now is eggs. That'll change shortly when we launch the CSA. But right now, I'm selling, I think this week I hit 50 dozen eggs, just generally, between quail, duck, chicken. 50 dozen eggs I sold. And that's awesome. And those eggs have become a really important part of this farmstead. The other thing to think about is that eggs can be laid year-round. I mean, it's January, and I'm literally right now picking up quail eggs. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you for these eggs. Whereas other things, my turnips that grow outside, I haven't had those for months. So having eggs has been a really important part of expanding my product offering, expanding my customer base because I have that to offer them. Then when we get to the CSA, that's going to be really important for keeping people around because I'm getting my eggs every week. They're wonderful, they're delicious, they're awesome, free range, keeps my dollars locally, and I'm going to stick around because I want to keep getting these eggs. The same could be said about specialty meats, things that you can't get anywhere else. So these are some of the things that I've diversified into. But if you're, let me just, before I get too far, the quails are fed. I've got their eggs, so we're going to head to the outside and collect eggs from the other side. Thank you, quails. You're doing good. They are looking so much better since we moved to the tractor style setup. Oh my goodness. I used to keep them in cages like everyone else did, but then I thought, there's got to be a better way. And they're molting. They're growing new feathers in on their backs that had been torn out from being too cramped and stressed. And they're just looking so good. I love it. One of the other ways that I diversified very quickly was making popcorn. I noticed that when I went to the farmer's market, there was nobody there who was selling any kind of fresh pop popcorn, kettle corn, butter, whatever. So I decided to just test it out. I had a little stovetop popper, just sat right there on the stovetop, and I could pop basically one bag of popcorn at a time. It took a long time, but I popped 35 bags or so, took them to the farmer's market, and when you know it, I sold out so fast. And the next week when I brought a little bit more, I sold out again, and I had people coming back telling me, this is the best popcorn I've had. Your movie theater butter, it's just like movie theater butter. It is so good. And this is where I feel like I almost cursed myself a little bit with this popcorn. I got to the point where in the summer I was selling 100 bags every week. Sometimes more. I think my maximum was like 120 bags. I mean, it was insane. Just popcorn. I invested in a larger kettle, like you see, kind of like you see at the fair, but not like the massive ones, kind of a mid-sized kettle. This kettle can make about 6 bags of popcorn at a time, so it's obviously much, much faster. This popcorn, for parts of the summer, some months, my main income source was popcorn. Now, I hate that because it takes so much time. In the summer, when I was getting ready for the markets, I'm talking 6 hours popping popcorn. But it was, like I said, during some months, my main income for the farm. So why popcorn? Well, obviously I mentioned that I didn't see anybody making popcorn, but the other part of it is because I was allowed to. In the state of Ohio, we have cottage food laws, which you probably have something very similar wherever you live. Cottage food laws allow us to sell certain types of food that are considered not dangerous or not potentially hazardous from our homes. So, this is what covers the little bake sale at the church up the road, but it's also what covers your grandma who makes bread or noodles and sells those at the local farmer's market. It's a great thing that we have these cottage food laws, especially because popcorn is one of them. So that's where I got my idea. If you're thinking, how can our farm diversify? What can we do to expand our product selection and attract more customers? Google cottage food laws, your state. Usually they'll have a list of some kind. Some states allow more cottage foods than others. Some are really lax with their rules. Others might require you to get like a home kitchen license. But generally, we're talking about things that are pretty, I don't want to say easy, but they're simple. You could learn them. We're talking breads, we're talking popcorn and seeds and nuts and spice mixes. There's so much space in the spice mixes at our local markets. As I'm preparing for this CSA, cottage foods are going to make up a pretty significant portion of my vendor partner base, because I'm targeting local. I really, really want small businesses. I'm not opposed to the people who have a storefront, but I don't know, I kind of like that small homestead aesthetic and keeping dollars really hyper local as opposed to, larger businesses. Now, obviously, I'm probably going to partner with some businesses that have shops. The coffee people who I have been buying from at the farmer's market for the last 3 years, they just opened a shop, and I have no problem partnering with them. So I'm not saying I would exclude those people, but what other ways, though, could your farm diversify? Depending on your state and depending on your state's laws, maybe you look into value-added products. So what's an example of that? Now, it's a little complicated the way I have to do it in the state of Ohio, but just for an example, I sell lettuce, I sell microgreens. In the summer, I'm selling cherry tomatoes, cucumbers, all kinds of things that would go in a salad. So something that I'm planning to try out with my CSA is ready-to-eat salads. So it's a single serving of salad, ready to go in a recyclable container. It's got a fork, it's got a cup of dressing, it's got all your toppings ready to go. Stick it right in your lunch. If you want to make it the whole lunch, pack some chicken or something, some bacon to put on it for a protein source, some chickpeas. That's an example of a value-added product. I sell all of the components of that, and you could certainly make it yourself, or save yourself the time. Let me make it. It's ready to go for you. It's super convenient, and it's something that I, as a farm, can offer in addition to my other products for some extra value. There's kind of two schools of thought in terms of specializing. I've seen the argument that small farms should specialize in weird stuff that nobody can find anywhere else. And in fact, I just made that argument about meat. But I don't think that argument necessarily holds true on everything. So what do I mean by that? You're trying to expand your sales, you're trying to expand your offerings for your customers. And so you pick up purple tomatoes and red cucumbers and spicy, super ridiculously hot peppers. These are all things that nobody will find anywhere else. You're the only buddy growing them. For me, I grew things like mustard, okra, turnip greens, all those southern favorites that nobody around me was selling. Well, I quickly found out why nobody around me was selling those things. It's because nobody was buying those things. Even though I could produce the most delicious mustard anyone has ever seen, there just wasn't a market for it. Hi, Muscovies. How are you today? Hello. You're looking very dapper. Yes. What? What was that? What was that? Say it again. Okay. He doesn't want to be on the podcast. And there's some water for you. Oh, but I've got a special surprise. It's more water! Oh, excuse you. Bless you. So you got to find that balance, right? Do your research. Find out what people actually want that they can't find. For my markets, popcorn was a good example. I was making something that nobody else was making. But it wasn't weird. It wasn't strange. It wasn't niche necessarily. But it was popular. It was needed. It was unique. I made it even more unique by offering special flavors and coming up with my own, like cinnamon kettle corn and fancy pumpkin spice kettle corn or spicy popcorn. There's so much you can do and fit into that unique space without trying to sell something that nobody wants. That's not to discourage you from growing weird and unique things. Certainly, if you develop that reputation of being the farm where people can go to get strange things, then you could corner that market. But I'm not going to say that it's going to be easy, and you're not going to show up at your local farmer's market and just start raking it in just because you've got weird tomatoes. So that's my cautionary tale about growing weird things. I mentioned my CSA is kind of unique in that I have the opportunity to communicate with people and, in a way, get to them before they go and buy their tomatoes. So I have the opportunity to grow something strange, let's say a green tomato. And in my weekly update, I could email them and say, hey, this week you're getting some green tomatoes. They're perfectly ripe, they're ready to go, they're delicious. Let me know what you think. So these people know now, okay, we got tomatoes. Awesome. And they know that but they wouldn't necessarily have bought that if they were at the farmer's market. If they were at the market and they saw my green tomatoes, they probably would have just thought, those are not ripe, I don't want those. And went and bought red tomatoes from someone else. So my point is, you really got to pay attention and find out what people like. And each market's going to be different. It's not going to be the same every time, every market, every place. Keep an eye out. Look for things that are potentially missing from your market. Look up cottage foods and whatnot and learn from that. All right, let's head into the greenhouse. It's warm in here. This is wonderful. We're at about 40 degrees outside. I mentioned earlier in the podcast that we are about 62 inside. Let me check and see if that's still the case. Thermometer, where you be? Oh, you're broken. Okay. Oh, goodness. Yeah, we're at about 60 degrees still. The water temperature this week, we are at 49. So we were at 44 yesterday, which is incredible. We went up 5 degrees overnight. I love that. Well, not overnight, but today, just from the sun that's been out. If we stay kind of floating back and forth between 40 and 50 degrees, that's enough to keep the lettuce growing, but also warm enough not to freeze. I got to get water and food for these kittens. I call them kittens because they're kind of small. They're young. They're two pretty young kittens. I don't know exactly how old they are. They don't want to talk to me though. I know they've come out of their carriers because they've eaten and they've used the litter box, but they would rather not talk to me. They probably won't talk to you either, so don't be expecting some cute meow or whatever in the background. Oh. What other ways is Moon Farm expanding our product offerings? So this year, one of the most exciting things that I have is my greenhouse. So the greenhouse is going to allow me to start seeds earlier, but it's also going to afford me the space to grow a lot more. So last year I did offer some plant starts. In fact, I did the thing I was just telling you, where you grow kind of weird stuff that nobody else has. But that was because I really wasn't growing that many. So if I was gonna grow plant starts, I may as well make them fun. The other thing that I noticed is that I'm gonna give them some wet food. They seem to like that a lot. And the rescue gave me a case of it. So we're gonna crack that open. Oh, delicious. Prime fillets turkey dinner with gravy. Yeah, I started some weird varieties of tomatoes and eggplants and whatnot to try and capture some of that market. And here's the reason I did it in this circumstance as opposed to why I wouldn't necessarily recommend it otherwise. Our farmers markets in Ohio don't start until June. What that means is that most people have already put their gardens in the ground. Our frost date in Ohio, in Northeast Ohio at least, where I am, our average last frost date is May 8th, which means by June, we're already a full month into the growing season, and not many people are still looking for a nice red tomato. They've got that already. They went and bought it at the local Lowe's. So that's why I decided, all right, I'm gonna plant some weird stuff and see if I can't get that to take off a little bit. And I did sell a good amount. Probably my most popular item was fresh herbs. Even though people can find those at Lowe's and Home Depot, there's something about herbs that people are like, oh, I didn't think about this before, and now that there is not a whole lot of like overwhelming variety of plants, now that I'm thinking about it, okay, I like that. Oh, this reminded me. I'm looking right now at my wheatgrass that I have growing here as pet grass. I've got them in little 3.5-inch pots, and I'm growing them as pet grass to go to local pet stores. This and quail eggs are the two things that are going to be going to pet stores. The grass, obviously, for cats and pets. And then the quail eggs are great reptile food. So that's one thing you might want to consider if you're trying to diversify is getting into the pet market somehow. I recommend that. There's a lot of room there for dog treats and whatnot, especially ones that are made from produce that you raise on the farm. Now I forget where I was going with that train of thought because I got distracted. Oh, goodness. Well, I'm just about done with my chores. I'm sure I'm going to figure out what I was talking about when I go back to listen to this and edit it. But we've already been going for 30 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. Before I go, I do want to thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I do have a limited edition hoodie that's available now. If you go to moonfarm.us/podcast, you can find that hoodie there. This is a limited edition hoodie. When it's gone, you won't be able to get one just like it. We'll have one similar, but not this exact hoodie ever again. Go check that out. It's a super soft hoodie, and I'm excited for you to check those out. If you want to see the video versions, well, not the video version of the podcast, but if you want to see some video vlogs, head over to my YouTube channel. If you want to see some behind the scenes short style stuff, TikTok is the way to go. If you want to see the polished content, Instagram is where you'll find that. And all of those links are available on my website, moonfarm.us. Top right corner is all the social links. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait for next episode. I hope to see you then.